Jack Bennett's grandfather once told him that deals with the devil are final. No returns, no refunds. Unfortunately, that sage wisdom was imparted during a bender at the Hangman's Rest when Jack was 17. And like most advice from that period of his life, it had been promptly forgotten. Now, as Jack stood in the drizzling rain outside a run-down flat in East Grimshaw, watching Chan struggle with an oversized equipment bag, he wished he'd paid more attention. "Tell me again, why we're doing this for free?" Chan asked, his expensive glasses fogging in the damp northern air. Jack pulled his collar up against the rain. "Because Madame Zelda said she'd curse your bollocks if we didn't. And I'm not taking chances with your reproductive system. Not after the incident with the fertility idol. We agreed never to mention that again," Chan hissed, nearly dropping the bag of hastily gathered exorcism supplies. "And her name's Patricia. She works at Tesco during the day." "Would you trust a psychic called Patricia from Tesco?" Jack asked, pressing the corroded doorbell. It emitted a sound like a dying electronic cat. "I don't trust a psychic called Madame Zelda either. But here we are," Chan muttered, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of the bag. "What's she even reporting?" Jack shrugged. "Something about a customer buying a cursed object from a charity shop. Standard Tuesday in Grimshaw." The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her 50s, with bleached blonde hair piled precariously atop her head, wrapped in a dressing gown adorned with so many costume jewelry pieces. She looked like a walking Argos catalogue. "You're late," she said, the thick smoke of a menthol cigarette wreathing her heavily made-up face. "And you're a fraud," Jack replied cheerfully. "But we don't hold that against you, most days." Chan pushed past them both, eager to get out of the rain. "Can we continue this touching reunion inside? This bag contains 7 different religious texts, and I don't think any of their gods are fond of water damage." Madame Zelda's flat had the distinct smell of incense trying desperately to mask cat urine. The living room had been transformed into a psychic parlor, with scarves draped over lamps and tarot cards scattered on a velvet-covered table. A crystal ball, unmistakably a repurposed snow globe with the base removed, sat in the center. "So where's this supposedly cursed customer?" Jack asked, flopping onto a couch that exhaled a cloud of dust. "She left," Zelda said, lighting another cigarette, "but not before buying that." She pointed to a small porcelain figurine on her mantelpiece, a smiling shepherd boy with a broken flute. Chan approached cautiously, pulling out his phone to snap a picture. "That's it. Looks like standard charity shop tat to me." "That's what I thought," Zelda said, taking a dramatic drag. "Until I touched it. Got a vision straight away. Woman who bought it is in danger, proper danger." "You got her name, address, anything useful?" Jack asked, already scrolling through his phone. "Better," Zelda replied. "I took a photo of her driver's license when she wasn't looking. For the customer database, like." Chan raised an eyebrow. "You don't have a customer database." "She doesn't know that, does she?" Zelda winked, handing over a crumpled receipt with a name and address scrawled on the back. "Margaret Finch, 42 Raven Court. And before you ask, yes, I want my usual fee for the information." Jack sighed, reaching into his jacket. "1 bottle of off-brand gin coming up next payday." "Make it 2, Zelda said. "Got a feeling this one's going to be trouble." Raven Court was one of those mid-century housing blocks that had been impressive in 1965 and depressing ever since. The concrete structure loomed against the grey sky like a tombstone. "Flat 3B, Chan said, consulting the receipt. "Let's just hope she's home and not, I don't know, already disemboweled by a demonic shepherd boy. Always the optimist, Jack remarked, pressing the buzzer. No response. He tried again. Still nothing. Well, we tried, Jack said, turning to leave. Chan grabbed his arm. We're breaking in. That's illegal. So is everything else we do. Technically, I'm sure there's a law against unlicensed exorcisms. Jack couldn't argue with that logic. Fine, but if we get arrested, you're calling your mum for bail money. Again. It took them less than a minute to jimmy the lock, a skill Jack had picked up during his brief career as a plumber. For entirely legitimate reasons, he would insist if asked. The door swung open with a horror movie creak. Hello, Chan called into the darkened flat. Mrs. Finch, we're breaking and entering, but with good intentions. The silence that greeted them was thick enough to spread on toast. I'm getting a bad feeling, Jack whispered, which was saying something considering his usual response to danger was inappropriate laughter. They moved cautiously into the living room. Everything appeared normal. A worn sofa, a television playing some daytime quiz show on mute, a half-drunk cup of tea on the coffee table. And there, on the mantelpiece, was an identical porcelain shepherd boy figurine. She bought the same one, Chan said, approaching it carefully. No, Jack replied, picking up the shepherd. Look closer. The shepherd in Jack's hand had a complete flute. The one back at Zelda's had a broken one. It's regenerating, Chan whispered. A loud thump from the bedroom made them both jump. Mrs. Finch, Jack called, setting the figurine down. Another thump, followed by a low, gurgling sound. Jack nodded to Chan, who pulled out a small vial of holy water from the equipment bag. They approached the bedroom door cautiously. Mrs. Finch, we're here to help, Chan said, his voice less steady than he'd have liked. The door flew open. Margaret Finch stood in the doorway, her eyes glassy and unfocused. Her mouth was stretched into an unnatural smile, and her fingers were extended like claws. Most disturbing, however, was the strange angle of her neck, twisted nearly 180 degrees, as though someone had tried to turn her head completely around but given up halfway. Oh, Jack said. Fuck. Mrs. Finch's body jerked forward in a series of unnatural movements, like a marionette with half its strings cut. A sound emerged from her throat. Not words, but a high-pitched series of notes that approximated a broken flute. Chan fumbled with the holy water. Is she playing music? Run, Jack shouted, grabbing Chan's arm and pulling him toward the front door. Mrs. Finch moved with unexpected speed, blocking their path. Her body contorted, limbs bending at impossible angles as she scuttled toward them like a deranged spider. Back door, Chan yelped, dragging Jack toward the kitchen. They burst through the kitchen and out onto a small balcony. The fire escape was rusted, but seemed intact. After you, Jack said, gesturing grandly as the sound of Mrs. Finch's flute-like screeching grew closer. Chan didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled down the metal stairs, Jack close behind. They didn't stop running until they reached the street, where they bent over, hands on knees, gasping for breath. What the actual fuck? Chan wheezed. Jack straightened up, running a hand through his damp hair. That, my friend, was the shepherd's pipe. The what now? The shepherd's pipe. It's a German folk legend. Spirit that possesses people and turns them into instruments. Plays them until they break, then moves on. Chan stared at him. How do you know that? Discovery Channel. Or maybe it was a horror film. Point is, we've got a possessed old lady who's going to start playing people like musical instruments, and we need to stop it. "We need to call Moira," Chan said, pulling out his phone. Jack grabbed his wrist. "Are you insane? Detective Campbell will have us arrested faster than you can say, breaking and entering." "She's the police." "Exactly. And we're the guys who just broke into a flat and left a woman with her neck snapped halfway round." Chan's shoulders slumped. "When you put it that way." He looked back up at the building. "We need to get that figurine." "Brilliant plan. We'll just waltz back in there and ask Mrs. Broken Neck if we can borrow her cursed tchotchke." "We need help," Chan admitted. Jack sighed, pulling out his own phone. "I know someone who might be able to assist, but you're not going to like it." Reverend Michaels looked like he'd been awake for 3 days straight, which, given his reputation around Grimshaw, was entirely possible. His clerical collar was askew, and his bloodshot eyes suggested a theological crisis best solved at the bottom of a whiskey bottle. "Let me get this straight," he said, voice gravelly from decades of smoking. "You want me to help you exorcise a German pipe spirit from an old woman who's already possibly dead, but still walking around?" They were sitting in the back room of St. Bartholomew's Church, which smelled of stale incense and the distinct aroma of the Reverend's preferred single malt. "That's the long and short of it, yeah," Jack confirmed. Michaels took a long sip from the mug that definitely didn't contain coffee. "And what exactly is in it for me?" Chan pulled a paper bag from his coat and placed it on the table. "Lagavulin, 16 years old." The Reverend's eyebrows rose appreciatively. "You boys know how to speak to a man of the cloth." He reached for the bag, but Chan pulled it back. "After we deal with the shepherd's pipe." Michael sighed. "Fine, but I should warn you, I haven't done an exorcism in months. Last one was a disaster." "How bad could it have been?" Jack asked. "The possessed person survived. The family dog wasn't so lucky, still finding bits of poodle in the church organ." Chan blanched. "Perhaps we should call someone else." "Like who?" Jack demanded. "The Pope." "I doubt he makes house calls to Grimshaw." "I'll do it," Michael said, standing up with effort. "But we'll need backup, spiritual and otherwise." Detective Moira Campbell was having a perfectly ordinary day until Jack Bennett's number appeared on her phone. She considered letting it go to voicemail, as she did with most calls from Jack. But something, intuition, or perhaps just the lingering trauma of their last encounter, made her answer. "Whatever it is, no," she said by way of greeting. "Lovely to hear your voice too, Detective," Jack replied. "How's the family?" "Cut the crap, Bennett. What have you and Wong done now? What makes you think we've done anything?" "Because you're calling me instead of avoiding me like the plague, which is your standard operating procedure." There was a pause on the line. "Fair point. Look, we've got a situation at 42 Raven Court. Possible possession. Definitely supernatural. Might be one corpse already." Moira closed her eyes, feeling the familiar headache that accompanied any interaction with Jack and Chan. "Tell me you didn't break in." "I could tell you that, but my mother raised me not to lie to officers of the law." "Your mother told me last week that she thinks you run a pest control business." "And in a way, we do. Just not the kind with rats, usually." Moira grabbed her coat. "Don't do anything stupid until I get there." "Wouldn't dream of it," Jack said, and hung up. Moira looked at her phone, then at the stack of paperwork on her desk that would once again go unfinished. "Bollocks," she muttered, and headed for the door. By the time Moira arrived at Raven Court, the situation had deteriorated considerably. 3 police cars were already on the scene, lights flashing. A small crowd of residents had gathered, held back by uniformed officers. She spotted Jack, Chan, and Reverend Michaels huddled by the entrance, looking simultaneously guilty and terrified. "What happened to 'don't do anything stupid'?" she demanded, approaching them. "We didn't," Chan protested, "but Mrs. Finch did. She's on the roof," Jack explained, pointing upward. Moira followed his finger. Sure enough, a figure was perched on the edge of the building, swaying precariously. Even from this distance, Moira could see something was very wrong with the way the woman's neck was positioned. "Christ," she muttered. "Won't help," Reverend Michaels said morbidly. "Believe me, I've asked." "She's going to jump," Chan said. "Or worse, she's going to start playing." "Playing what?" Moira asked. As if in answer, a high-pitched, discordant melody began to drift down from the roof. A sound like a flute being played by someone who had neither the skill nor the appropriate number of fingers to do so properly. "That," Jack said grimly, "the shepherd's pipe. It's starting." The crowd began to shift uneasily. Moira watched in horror as several people's heads began to twitch, turning at unnatural angles as though pulled by invisible strings. "It's spreading," Chan whispered. "The music, it's possessing them too." One by one, people in the crowd began to emit the same discordant notes as Mrs. Finch, their bodies jerking and contorting. "We need to stop the source," Reverend Michaels said, pulling a battered Bible from his coat pocket. "The figurine. It's in her flat," Jack explained quickly to Moira. "Porcelain shepherd boy. We need to destroy it before the whole town turns into a demonic orchestra." Moira made a split-second decision. "You three, get to the flat. I'll handle the crowd and call for backup." "You believe us?" Chan asked, surprised. "After what happened at the primary school Christmas pageant last year? I'd believe you if you told me the Queen was secretly a lizard person." She pulled out her radio. "Go." The stairwell was chaos. Residents of Raven Court were flooding down, trying to escape the building as the eerie music grew louder. Jack, Chan, and Reverend Michaels pushed against the tide, making their way up to the third floor. "Her door's probably locked again," Chan panted as they reached 3B. Jack tried the handle. It swung open easily. Or not. The flat was exactly as they'd left it, except for one detail. The shepherd figurine was now in the center of the coffee table, and it was glowing with a sickly green light. "Don't touch it directly," Michaels warned, pulling on a pair of latex gloves he'd apparently been carrying for just such an occasion. "We need to contain it first, then destroy it." "With what?" Jack asked. "I didn't bring any figurine-destroying equipment." Chan reached into his bag and pulled out a small lead box. "Always be prepared." "You carry a lead box for cursed objects?" Jack asked incredulously. "After the incident with the fertility idol?" "Yes." Reverend Michaels carefully lifted the figurine, which emitted a high-pitched whine of protest. He placed it in the box, and Chan snapped the lid shut. Immediately, the sound diminished. "Now what?" Jack asked. "Now we perform the exorcism," Michael said, opening his Bible, "and pray it works better than the poodle incident." On the roof, Mrs. Finch continued her macabre concert, her twisted body silhouetted against the grey sky. Below, more and more residents had fallen under the spell of the music, their bodies contorting as they joined the discordant symphony. Moira had managed to evacuate most of the unaffected residents and called for backup, though she had no idea what she was going to put in her report. Mass hysteria induced by cursed figurine wasn't exactly standard police procedure. Just as she was considering going up to the roof herself, the music stopped abruptly. The possessed residents froze mid-movement, like a video put on pause. Then, as one, they collapsed. Moira looked up to see Mrs. Finch teetering on the edge of the roof. Without thinking, she sprinted into the building and up the stairs. "Is it done?" Jack asked as Reverend Michaels completed the last prayers. The shepherd figurine had crumbled to dust inside the lead box, which was now firmly sealed. "I believe so," Michaels replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Though I should probably lay off the whiskey before performing these in the future." "Mrs. Finch," Chan began, but was interrupted by the sound of sirens outside. The three men rushed to the window. Below, paramedics were attending to the collapsed residents. There was no sign of Mrs. Finch. "We need to get to the roof," Jack said, already heading for the door. They found Moira kneeling beside Mrs. Finch's body, checking for a pulse. "Is she—" Chan couldn't finish the question. "Alive," Moira confirmed. "Barely. Her neck is broken, but somehow she's still breathing." As they watched, Mrs. Finch's eyes fluttered open. They were clear now, free of the glassy possession. "What happened?" she croaked. "I was shopping, and then—" "You had a fall," Moira said smoothly. "An ambulance is on its way." Mrs. Finch's eyes widened suddenly. "The music, I can still hear it." Jack and Chan exchanged alarmed glances. "What music, Mrs. Finch?" Jack asked carefully. "The shepherd boy's pipe. It's still playing. Somewhere." Her eyes rolled back, and she fell unconscious again. Reverend Michaels held up the lead box. "But we destroyed it." "No," Chan said slowly, realization dawning. "We destroyed this one. There was another at Madame Zelda's." "And probably more," Jack added grimly. "How many shepherd figurines do you think that charity shop had?" "Bloody hell," Moira muttered. "This isn't over, is it?" Jack looked at her, then at Chan and Reverend Michaels. "Far from it, Detective. In fact, I think it's just beginning." In the distance, barely audible over the sirens, the faint sound of a flute drifted through the rain-soaked air of Grimshaw. Jack Bennett's grandfather had been right after all. Deals with the devil are final. No returns, no refunds. And somewhere in Grimshaw, the shepherd was still playing.